Hi, everyone, and welcome to Candid with Index. I'm Mike Volpi, a partner here at Index Ventures, and I'm delighted to have with us today Alex Wang, the founder and CEO of Scale.AI. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm going to start with a few questions for you that go a little bit ways back, which
It's
was not that long.
Yeah.
No. But when we first met, you were telling me about your family. Your mom and dad, who are both nuclear physicists, if I'm not mistaken. You have a brother who's an academic. You have a sister, I think, who's also an academic.
Two brothers, both academics.
So you were sort of the chip that fell pretty far off the block relative to where your family went. Tell us a little bit about why you chose a different path.
One of the things that was really lucky is while I was growing up, there was all of this technological progress that was happening, right? Like when the iPhone came out, I think it was like 11 or 12 or whatnot. And then you sort of saw all of this innovation, all this immense progress happen because of like a lot of really incredible companies out here in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And so having sort of grown up through that, watching all of that and sort of feeling that that was like the main engine behind the world getting better, you sort of like come out of that thinking, okay, yeah, academics seem great, but most of the work that's being done in academics right now doesn't seem to be changing the world in any way. It was very visceral. The smartphone totally changed the world. And then all these really incredible companies like Google and Facebook totally changed the world. And so part of it was just this sort of thinking to myself, like, hey, if I want to have an impact, I should actually go where there's impact being made, you know?
You know, I worked at Cisco for a bunch of years. And I really wanted to get a job there back in 1994, so I finagled a way to get an interview with the CEO at the time. So when I got brought in, I didn't know what to expect. He gave me 30 minutes. And the first question he asked me was, what's the most important lesson you learned from your dad? Which, you know, I prepared for a lot of questions, never thought about that one. So here's the question for you. What are the most important lessons you learned from your parents?
Both my parents, they immigrated from China for their PhDs to do here in the US at UIUC. I think there were two main things that, looking back, I really sort of adopted from my parents. I think the first was just unrelenting persistence. Even if you have like these very difficult things, and they immigrated to the US, they didn't have very much money to their name when they moved here. So they had to just be very persistent and like doggedly pursue a lot of different things, like finding their first jobs, when they're in their jobs, making progress, etc. And so that's one trait that I think I really adopted from them.
Yeah.
And then another one, I think, and this is something my dad would always talk to me about. So when I was a kid, I liked mental games and stuff like that. So I ended up playing chess. And my dad was very encouraging for me to play chess. And he would always talk about how the reason you should play chess is because it'll teach you mental toughness. And as a kid, you don't really know what that means. If you play in these chess tournaments, these games are like hours and hours long. You learn to just like, even in bad situations, to just work through it and stay in a good headspace. And I didn't think about it a lot then, that, like this concept of mental toughness or mental strength, but today it feels very visceral. It's like, wow, I actually really gained that from my dad.
When did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I watched The Social Network when it came.
Seminal movies that we all have to watch.
Very seminal movie. And you kind of watch that and you're like, the process of a company being started is so random and in some sense so magical. And I think that's what made it such a good story for a movie. But I think after watching that, it sort of feels like something that one could do. Before that, I had no interest in business at all. Like I was very much a technologist, only cared about technology. Yeah. It was probably like once I worked within a company, you look around, you see how things are working, you have all these ideas about how to improve things, etc. And that was probably the moment where I was like, okay, at some point it'd be really cool to try this on my own.
How did you, I mean, we'll talk about the evolution at Scale a little bit, but how did you land on the original idea? What was your kind of inspiration?
The big thing that was sort of thinking through, I worked on a couple of these ideas. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. But the thing about the ones that did work is like, you want to try to build things that you yourself would use. And I was kind of thinking through this, both my time at Quarry and my time at school. One of the things that I was definitely very excited about from a technology perspective was machine learning and AI. It was like very clear that it was one of the most exciting technologies. You could do all these things with machine learning and AI that you could never do before. And it was totally incredible. And I tried to work on a bunch of side projects relating to machine learning and AI before. There was always this, like, all these bottlenecks, but one of the biggest bottlenecks was data. And so I sort of thought, it was kind of this process of thinking back through my life as a builder, my life as a developer, what were the things that were just really painful or that I wish existed. And one of the clear things that came up was like, there should be a better way to get label data, or there should be a better way to get a bunch of data for machine learning. And that was kind of the original insight. And it's kind of one of these things where when I first thought about it, or when I first said it or wrote it down or whatnot, it sounded okay.
Yeah.
The idea sounded okay, but then I sort of, I went to bed that night and I thought more about it. And then after a couple of days, you sort of are like, wow, that actually would be really great.
The idea that you ended up landing on was a little bit of a pivot, shall we say, a mini pivot from the original concept of Scale. Originally, you were going to sort of just have an API where you send an image and it comes back labeled, and then you sort of moved aside from that. Talk to us a little about the process that you went through of discovery, of moving from the original concept to what Scale has ended up doing.
So the tagline that we used initially for Scale was an API for human labor. I remember that was like the one-line idea, and a lot of that, thinking back, was really anchored on this sort of how it was being done already, which was like a lot of people were using MTurk, Mechanical Turk,
Yep.
to label their data, and so it was anchored as like, given that that's how people are doing it today, then we want to do something that's better than that, more developer-centric, etc. I think it was a good idea, got good traction, people were really excited about it, etc. But it didn't go all the way to solving real problems for customers, if that makes sense. We ended up focusing on autonomous vehicles as sort of the first major customer base for what we were working on.
Yeah.
Part of this was colored by the fact that a lot of the smartest people I knew happened to have been working there. So it's like, hey, that seems like a great place to focus. And then they also clearly had large needs. That was one of the better decisions we ever made at Scale. And then now that we've learned a lot, we have this at scale product, we have a lot of smart people working on this problem. Now we can go back and sort of broaden again and serve the data labeling needs for everybody.
So Scale's gone from pretty small business in a very short span of time, 2 years, to being a pretty sizable business. Your last round of financing was at $1 billion plus. You've gone, how many employees now?
About 140.
140. I think that you were sort of in the 30 range when we originally met. Talk to us about the biggest challenges that you faced in Scale as a business, and kind of the biggest lessons that you've learned of going through the process with the velocity that you've gone through it.
In some sense, I will never know what it would have been like to do this at a slower pace. So for me, it's 100 miles an hour or nothing. But I think one of the biggest things really is that it's all about the people. It's easy to think about as kind of like this system, right? It's like you're trying to you have this team and you have this other team, and you're trying to hook them up together somehow. Like try to think of it as kind of like an engineer, right? You're trying to hook these teams up together, and you have this other team, and you want to track the inputs and the outputs to all these teams. And that's a good mental model, but at the end of the day, it's so much just about the actual people, right? And both when we were 30 people and even now when we're 140 people, I'm sure those will continue being true, the stuff that makes the whole thing work are actually just really great people, like smart, hardworking, proactive, really go-getter kind of people throughout the company that are able to accomplish great things. And so maybe the biggest realization is that at the highest level, you got to think about it as this system and how you hook everything up. You always should keep in your mind's eye, but regardless of anything, the thing that I should spend the most mental energy and the most heart and soul in is just making sure that we find and we attract and we get really amazing people.
One last thing I wanted to ask about Scale. Something unusual you've done is that your customers are some of them who can't talk about publicly, but are some of the most impressive, significant companies in Silicon Valley. And even within those companies, they are some of the most significant and impressive people in Silicon Valley. And you've managed to sell product to them, sell your services to them. What's it like having to sell to the upper echelon of the technological community? How do you go about and do it? How do you create affinity and enchant them with the products and services that you have to sell?
I'm naturally a huge geek and a huge nerd, and I love just reading about and thinking about like the cutting edge of AI. Whether or not I was working on Scale, I was working on Scale. I would want to do that regardless because it's just really cool technology.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is sort of this thinking about and understanding like all the nuances of the cutting edge of technology and how all that would get implemented in the real world, and thinking about where are the gaps and where are the exciting directions, etc. Having my own view and then figuring out how Scale fits in context in all of that is one of the most important things, because ultimately when I sit down with these customers or we talk to these customers, we really try to work with them in thinking sort of ahead of the ball, like with all this technology that's coming down the pipe, with all the great things that we can do, how can we partner together to do the most incredible stuff based on how the world is changing? I think that's one really important aspect of it. And I think another important aspect is just to, like, at the end of the day, they're still your customers. So at the end of the day, you still need to understand what are your challenges, what are your pains, and how do we solve them, and whether or not they're these impressive people in Silicon Valley or they're a small business owner. It's about having that empathy so that you can actually you can understand their problems and really sort of pull those pains out of them.
You've been at this for a long time, longer than most, probably since high school. You've interacted with customers. You've recruited people who are in the middle of this field. If you had to give a state of the union for AI, where is the technology right now in its cycle to maturity? How practical is it for everybody to use and adopt it? Tell us about sort of, like your current, this is where we are in the world of AI.
Before neural networks, there were a lot of traditional methods, more traditional methods of AI, like SVMs, gradient boosted trees, etc., that worked really well for a small subset of problems, recommender systems, search systems, etc. And these have continued to be really, really incredible systems and sort of the first wave of AI enabling amazing things. Then with deep learning and neural networks, this technology is also very mature at this point. It is ready to be applied throughout the world, more or less, and it works incredible for these kinds of data that we didn't have a handle on before. So all of a sudden we can do incredible things with images, with text, with audio, with videos, etc. Some of these applications, autonomous vehicles, rests upon a lot of this supervised learning, a lot of this deep learning. The Amazon Go style systems rely on it. The Siri and these voice assistants rely on it, etc. So there's a lot of these technologies. We're really just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of application, but from a technology perspective or from a science perspective, we're most of the way there. And that I think is the most exciting thing about AI. At Scale, I think we're really focused on, I think most of the world is really honing in on, is how do we take the current deep learning technology and deploy it very broadly throughout the world. And one of the big bottlenecks is data that we're really focused on, that we care a lot about, obviously. But there's a lot more of these challenges in the actual deployment of that technology broadly within the world. There's ethical questions around what does it really mean if these systems control so much of our lives that we need to work through. There's like actual operational problems, versus like how do you have these deep learning systems, like what oversight do you have on them, how do you deal with bias, etc. So there's a lot of these questions, but ultimately as a technologist, I think of those as implementation details versus the fact that the technology works. Like you can recognize whatever you want in an image almost, and that'll work. That is the most exciting thing in terms of how the world is going to change over the next 10, 20 years. The most exciting thing is how do we take this and apply it more broadly in the real world and have sort of like enable this long tail of different applications. It's very similar, I think, ultimately, we talk a lot about this, to mobile or even the internet back in there, or even the original computer. Like it's this really big wave of technology that we're just in the early phases of it crashing on shore.
If you were to put that frame on AI, are we in year one? Is it a 20-year transformation? Is it a 10-year transformation? How far into it are we? Where would you sort of rate us on the progress towards maturity?
We're very early. It'll be a 10, 20-year arc, so to speak. I think it's probably closer to 20 years because in those 10 years, we'll have more breakthroughs that we can then apply, because the rate of progress in research is also really, really incredible. We're so early on in the sense that there's very few at-scale applications today, actually. So the voice assistance is a massive one. That one's a very big one. And then probably the only other one that's similarly at scale, and this is very it's a very kind of uncomfortable topic, but is the facial recognition technology that's being used in a bunch of different places around the world. And this is sort of kind of it if you think about really large scale things that touch everybody's lives, etc. And there's going to be a lot more, clearly, just like there's yet to be like the Uber, just like there was Uber for the smartphone, there's just be the Uber for AI, more or less. And there's going to be a lot of these incredible applications, but smart people still need to build them and deploy them, etc.
What would you say right now are the biggest challenges to the deployment and operationalization of AI?
It's hard for people to know what the limits of the technology are, right? We like to think about AI, like even the term artificial intelligence, like that implies a huge amount of capabilities that the technology doesn't have today. Then once you have the use cases, you have to build the models and you have to like build the actual machine learning around it. And I think that gap is still very hard for most people, most organizations. And that's what we have to smooth out right now. And then we'll get to all the stuff that I think the big tech companies are dealing with today, which are like ethics and bias and explainability and the operational challenges, etc.
So one of the things we read a lot about is this issue of jobs, people's jobs disappearing. If you look at self-driving, what about taxi drivers? What about truck drivers? Like 8 million people in America employed drive some form of commercial vehicle. What's your view on the implications that AI has on jobs?
A lot of people have this mental model. We have all these people who do this work today, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a magic switch that flips and we're going to be able to automate all this work. The media paints that like all this will happen, right? And the reality is that almost no technology is that magical in its power, right? Almost no technology is sort of this like you snap your fingers and then all of a sudden everything changes. And the reality of what's going to happen is the technology that we're going to build will be so limited that more than anything, it's just going to make these jobs easier. You would think that once you had, once the ATM was introduced, all of a sudden there would be no bank tellers, right? You would think that the number of bank tellers in the US would just go to zero. And that's not actually what happened. What actually happened is the number of bank tellers in the US actually went up pretty considerably. And there's a number of ways to look at what happened. I think one of them is that the automated teller machine allowed the bank tellers to focus on much higher value parts of their job, and so all of a sudden the bank tellers were more valuable to the companies, and so they want to hire more of them. The automated teller machine enabled so much growth in the banking sector that overall the number of bank tellers had to grow. I think there's a lot of different things that feed into that, but at the end of the day, it's a very complex system, and how automation or machine learning will impact that is very nuanced. And the most likely outcome really is that it makes these jobs much easier and allows the people in these jobs to focus on the higher value aspects.
Looking even a little further out, should we be worried about Elon's Robocalips? Let's put it this way. Are we working for the machines or are the machines working for us?
Yeah, I mean, as of now, for any machine, you can just turn it off. And we'll be able to do that for a while. The other interesting thing I want to say on this automation point is that for a lot of stuff that people are working on, there's an immense amount of good to be done by being able to scale out some of these services. So one of the examples is around medical service, right? There's like a 10x shortage in number of doctors globally, and a lot of people aren't able to get good medical care in the first place. The thing that's going to happen with machine learning is not automating the medical care that people get in the United States. That's very unlikely, but it's actually providing medical care to people broadly around the world. These topics are always like, they're nuanced, there's depth to them, there's things about how the world worked today that are really weird, and but nobody likes to talk about those.
Obviously, the big tech companies, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, have all benefited already from their use of AI. What's your view on new businesses that are going to be created around AI? Are there going to be hundreds of them or thousands of them?
One really interesting thing about AI that I think is very different actually from a lot of these technological revolutions that we've had in the past is that AI is a more capital intensive technology than the internet was, for example, or mobile was, for example, in terms of building a business around it. Even ignoring the fact that you need to hire smart, expensive people, but you also need data, you need a lot of compute, you need to set up all this infrastructure, etc. So it's more expensive to build an AI business than most other kinds of businesses. It's funny, like there's a lot of companies that are just like, we're doing this, but with AI, so it's better, and that's not always the case. And so we're gonna have to learn where is it that AI can actually make an impact, and where can actually yield an impact. And so that learning has to happen. But ultimately, there will be many billion-dollar companies that spawn off the back of AI as their core technology.
One more point about sort of this AI revolution. You often talk about this, but data is the new gold in terms of value creation in AI. A lot is talked about how the big giants, the Googles, Facebooks of the world, have so much data. Amazon has so much data. So if you're not Amazon and Google, they have all the data. How can you use AI to your competitive advantage? Like, are you just going to always be second best?
There's always going to be niches, and there's always things that are outside of their sort of like field of view that are really important that they're just not focused on, and may never be focused on, right? And this is very relevant to the topic of data, where these large technology companies, they have so much data about their users and their consumers and how they use their products, etc. But for most things outside of that, they actually have extremely little data. You just have to pick something where there's a niche that's not something that the big company's focused on, and then baked within that, you actually have an opportunity to build your own data advantage.
I want to close out with talking a little more about Scale. So we talked about how you got here. We talked about some of the learnings in the journey. Talk to us about what's next for you guys. Where are you going with the business, and what should we expect from you and Scale?
Our vision is to accelerate the development of AI. Like a lot of what we talked about with respect to AI, I think there's just this incredible multi-decade trend and opportunity that's going to happen in the world around being able to productionize this technology in all sorts of places in the real world. And I can't even think of all the ways in which it'll be productionized. It's very exciting. What we really want to do is, how do we fuel that to the best degree possible? Obviously with data annotation services that we have, so fueling this sort of data leg of this problem, but also how do we build products that fuel the other legs, right? Like how do we in general enable organizations to build machine learning a lot faster? And if their bottleneck is something else, maybe dealing with all the infrastructure involved or dealing with managing the whole pipelines, etc., being able to help there. And so if we plot out our own journey, we really just want to be this infrastructure base, or this infrastructure that people can rely on that helps them build incredible machine learning. Baked into that, there's enough for us to do for a very, very long time. We will constantly be inspired by what our customers can do and accomplish over the following decades, that I don't think we'll be bored anytime soon.
One of the things that I want to pull out of your comment there is, I'm guessing that companies shouldn't just call you for their labeling needs.
No, yeah. If there's anything that we can help with in building out, in helping you accelerate your own machine learning development, please let us know. Please let us know your pains. We have a couple of products in beta right now that we're trying with some of our customers that could be really cool for you.
Well, Alex, listen, it's been an absolute privilege working with you for the last couple of years. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure as well. I look forward to working together over the decades of AI to come.
All right, so Alex, now that we've gotten all the tough stuff over with, we're going to play a little game. It's very important because the winner, either you or me, will receive this amazing trophy, one of a kind. Made especially for this. Since your company Scale, at least today, is in the business of labeling and annotating data, we decided that we should play a game that sees how good you are at it. And the obvious thing is to think about Rorschach tests, but there's no right or wrong answer with Rorschach tests. So what we actually have done is created a bunch of silhouettes of celebrities, famous people, that we're going to show you the silhouette, and you're going to have to identify who the person is.
I'll try my best.
Ready?
I'm trained at looking at images.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see how good you really are. And you have no software right now, so it's not AI, it's I. Ready?
All right.
Okay, here is the first one.
So it's one person.
One person with a double image.
Okay.
It's reflective, basically.
Yeah, this is gonna be tough.
And I could give you a hint, just to make it a little bit easier for you.
All right. What's the hint?
Let's talk tech. Tech people.
It's a tech person. Okay.
Just a wild guess. Go
This
for
is
it.
tough. Yeah. All right. That is Mark Zuckerberg.
Damn, the guy's good.
Oh wow.
Mark Zuckerberg it is. All right. Second celebrity. You ready?
All right.
All right, here we go.
Oh. Kerry Washington.
Good effort. I'm going to give you one more guess.
Wow, this is not an easy task.
We're coming up on Super Bowl, halftime shows.
Beyonce?
Correct. There she is.
Oh wow.
I don't know how you're going to get this one, man. Okay.
Oh, Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Ooh, guy is good. Very, very good.
I watched the
Nicely done.
Jumanji movie, so.
Very well done. Okay. Ready? Next one.
Oh. I'm gonna go for a hint.
We talked about him today.
What? We talked about him today?
Yeah.
Who did we even talk about?
AI.
Oh my gosh. AI. Talked about.
Robocalips.
Oh, it's Elon, I see. You gave that one to me.
Yeah,
That doesn't
it's
even
okay.
look like Elon.
Yeah.
Alright.
Okay, and the last one.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Holidays coming up.
Oh, Martin Luther.
Voila. Well done.
Alright. Thanks for all the hints.
All right. That was good. That was easy.
Getting me through it
That's
all.
a total count of 5 correct.
I feel pretty good about that, actually.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, you should. You should. That's
All
excellent. Okay.
Alright,
Now, this is not my profession, obviously. So.
your turn. I'll try
Alright.
to give you as good of hints.
Man,
Right? It's hard.
it's super hard.
The hint is
Comedian?
it's in tech. It's a tech one.
Heck. Tim Cook?
It is. Wow, good for that.
All right. Well, the glasses were a little bit of a giveaway.
I know.
All right.
Good on you. Good on you.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I don't even know if that's right, but I'll show it.
That is correct. Yeah, that's Arnold.
All right. Well, good job. Good job. Not looking good for my chances.
I have no idea.
Sports figure.
LeBron James?
Yeah.
Nice.
This is
Yeah,
not
I
looking,
think you need to hire me. I'm
not looking good for me. Yeah. Not looking good.
Well, it's a tie, Alex. I think we'll have to share this. I'll take it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays. And no, seriously, man. Here it is. It's all yours.
No, you take it. You paid for it.
It's all good. Alex, thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate taking the time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Really
it's a
enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.